Today is World Book Day. I hope you've visited your local library or your local bookstore or opened up your e-reader. My name is Jane Livingston, and I'm the president of the Knowlton Literary Association, and I want to welcome you to what I'm calling the Eastern edition of our webinar series. Back in February, we introduced you to 3 Indigenous authors from Western Canada and from Ontario, and today we're heading east to Newfoundland, and you are going to meet one of its finest authors. Donna Morrissey is going to be in conversation with our host and Master of Ceremonies, Roger Williams. Donna will be sharing some passages from her yet to be published memoir, I think scheduled to be released sometime in the fall. Following Donna and Roger's conversation, you will have an opportunity to ask questions. Before getting the webinar underway, there are 3 items that I would like to draw your attention to. Firstly, plans are underway for the Knowlton Literary Festival in October. Yes, we are going to have a festival. What format it takes will be governed by, guess what, the pandemic. We are looking at 3 possible scenarios. 1, totally virtual, 2, totally live, or 3, a combination of the 2. For the live component, we are considering going to the great outdoors, pitching a lovely big tent in one of our very beautiful locations here in Knowlton. We'll have auxiliary heating. We will have safe seating arrangements. There'll be lots of open air, and all the accompanying services would be available. The board will make its decision in the latter part of May into early June. But we would like to hear from you before we make that decision. You can, by email or using one of our social media platforms, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, let us know how you would feel about attending a live outdoor venue as I have described it, or would you be more comfortable meeting our authors from the comfort of your living room? And we'd like to hear from you within the next little while. We'd appreciate that. Secondly, I would like to thank the Writers Union of Canada for their generous support with this webinar with Donna. And in closing, I would like to say that we here, the Knowlton team, we're coming to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Abenaki people. So thank you for joining us, and I know you're going to enjoy this webinar. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jane. I am indeed Roger Williams. I'd like to remind you that not only is it World Book Day, but it's Shakespeare's 457th birthday today. So I do hope that you're all out there raising a glass in his honor. I think I can promise you that in the next hour, you're in for a literary treat. We'll be spending it in the company of a writer who's widely and rightly regarded as one of Canada's finest. We are, of course, talking about Donna Morrissey. Canadian she is, but I'm pretty sure if you were to ask her, the first designation out of her mouth would be Newfoundlander. Donna is nothing if not a Newfoundlander. It's on this magic rock that she has grounded the 6 novels that she has written to date. Those novels have garnered critical acclaim, shortlist nominations, prizes, and awards, both at home and, important to underline, abroad. She is recognized beyond our own shores. They've been translated into a number of languages, some of them quite surprising, and I'd like to ask Donna a little about that later in the hour. Her screenplay, Clothesline Patch, was nominated for a Gemini Award. And I mustn't forget Cross Katie Cross, a children's book that she wrote, which was illustrated by her daughter Bridget, which must have been a delightful experience for both of them. I think they're still talking to each other. And now she's turned her attention and her talent to the writing of a memoir. Its title, Pluck. You can see it behind me, even though not yet in quite in book form. And it has also an extended title, which again is something that I'd like to ask Donna about as we go along. I'm very happy to say that Donna has agreed to make this memoir the centerpiece of our conversation this evening, and even happier to say that if we all promise to behave ourselves, she might well consent to a pre-publication glimpse of what's in store for us. Donna, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. It's both a pleasure and a privilege for us, and we're absolutely thrilled. What I'd like to do first, Donna, is perhaps ask you if you would be good enough to read from the memoir, but also I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about memoir. I've said that your 6 novels are grounded in the life that you knew when you grew up in Newfoundland. It has clearly, they all have clearly autobiographical elements. What is it about a memoir that appealed to you enough that you wanted to go back over those experiences in a way, but in memoir form rather than in novel form? What is the difference for you, and why did you choose to do this now?
Big question, but first let me say thank you. And it's really great to be talking with you. And thank you for that lovely introduction. I wish my family was listening, and don't get much respect at home. I can't see anybody, but I understand there's quite a few of you out there watching this and listening, and it is Friday evening. So it's really, really great to give us this time. So I'm really honored, flattered, and yeah. So the question, why memoir? Is when you're choosing to write a book, you don't really choose. It's what's coming down the tube, into that psyche out through. So it's not like I think I'm going to write a memoir. It's, when I write a book, the next one is just there waiting. And so it's never about choosing, it's about what's there waiting, and it pushes us way down through. And so when I finished my 6th novel, this memoir was waiting. So I just followed that path, that energy path that is working its way through me. And I think that a lot of my private life, personal life has been into those novels. But I have a huge story to tell, and the novels weren't quite putting it out there, the story that I wanted to tell, that about my family and me, and the bits and pieces that my mother mainly, such an incredible story and journey that we both went on together. And I wanted to tell that story. It's memoir is a different kettle of fish than fiction. You got to be really, really responsible here. But it's the one place, like, there's a lot of people want to write memoir today, and I so heartily agree with it, because memoir is where you get to tell your truth. And lots of times we're so misunderstood. And a lot of things happen to us when we're out there gunning through life. Life streams past us. It takes us with it. It knocks us up against things. We latch on to those things, and we make stories out of them. What happened. And I think it's through writing our stories that we get to examine those things that happened back there. We get to unpack it, break it apart. What the hell happened? Because most times we're young, we're not really understanding what it is. We're taken off guard. And years later, you get to look back on some of those events and unpack them, take them apart and look at what happened, what the frig happened. And by doing that, we start understanding it. And I think that when we start understanding something from all aspects, at least those aspects that we can see, we start healing from it. We start, because, we start healing, and through healing, we learn, we transcend the pain, we transcend it. And once we transcend something, we're survivors now, at least from this particular story. And everything that happens to us is like that, a bump after bump, not all negative. Sometimes joyous things too create a lot of anxiety and angst within us. And I think that our lives are built on story after story after story after story. And this is how we make our way through life. So with this memoir, Penguin asked me one question, which was really, really good because it's grounding. Because the biggest question people ask is, well, where do you start? How do you write a memoir? And a memoir is not an autobiography. It's not about everything you've ever done. It's not like Jane Fonda writing it's not about facts and data. Memoir is about a chapter of your life. It's about something specific that happened to you, and maybe a number of 3 or 4 other specific things that winds or weeds its way into that. So you can have 10 memoirs by the time you're 60 if you wanted. Maybe you want to write a memoir about your marriage or relationships. I stayed away from that one. Or maybe you might want to write a memoir about the terrible thing that happened to you when you went into that abyss one day, mental illness. Or maybe you lost somebody and the grieving process nearly took you down. And maybe you want to write a memoir about that. I was really lucky. I get to check off all the boxes. Yes.
That hindsight gives you the chance to shape things, because you talked about the weave, because hindsight allows you to see a pattern that emerges. And I'm interested that you say you can write 5 or 6 memoirs, because it's not this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened.
No. You
can see that shape and see that pattern.
Yeah, you can reach forward. You start. Penguin asked one question: How did you leave an isolated outport, or be raised in an isolated outport, and make your way to the stage, the national stage as an author? How did that happen? How did you do that? So that was kind of a grounding question, and because there's so many diversions, there's so many aspects to life. And the
title, The Raucous, Terrible, Amazing Journey to Becoming a Novel. And
yes.
And that's the shape of this memoir. In a sense.
That's the shape, but so much got packed into it, so many different aspects through life, because, if I wanted to focus, say, and I'm saying this for the benefit of people who are listening who want to write a memoir. So if I had been asked about, how did you get to be an embittered old woman at the age of 65, relationships. And I'm not, I finally found a good guy. But the point is that if I wanted to write about that, I would have started back with relationships. I would have started back with my mom, my dad, how I saw them, and what relationship meant to me as I was growing up, first dates and all of that. So you keep it focused, you around there. But I was asked about my journey to becoming an author. So I started with imagination as a child. What were these things about me as a kid that showed this kind of this direction, even though it was no arrow, believe you me. no.
How did you start a memoir?
Well, you start by, with me, I guess I started in the beginning, that the first picture book that my Aunt Marina, who was my teacher at the time, Dr. Seuss, the imagination, and our first movie, because being from a small isolated outport, you remember everything. We had our first movie, our first book, our first everything. And so I could map that easily, and then a few times I got lost and along the way for sure. But you keep on that direction towards becoming. So you follow the imagination and you follow the desire, and then other things become involved because the memoirs. But what I'd like to do actually is read the intro to the memoir, because everything, you need to be able to say, they say in one line, what it is your memoir is about, or what your book is about, what the heart of it is. And so you can't really write an introduction to your memoir until it's done. So I wrote this after it was done. And so what's included in here is what's included in the memoir. And so if you can do that, and especially if you can do it beforehand, you've got yourself a real good map and a guide going through. So I wrote bits of this and bits of this, you know, but should I dive in and start reading this?
Please, yeah.
We miss having your faces out there and everybody's listening, you know, you get your energy from them. So all I've got is poor Roger looking at me, giving me the thumbs. Can they see you as well as me?
I'll jump up and down from time to time, Donna. Okay.
Okay. I might have to change my glasses here because I got 5 pairs. And some of them aren't as strong as others. Oh, Jesus, where'd everybody go? Here we are, back. Okay. Okay, so this is the intro. This is the intro. And I'm trying, and with the intro, you want to introduce who you are. Who are you? What are you coming from and what are you doing? And what's this going to be about, you know? So here we go. I can hear the applause. Okay. If you were a bird flying over the most easterly fringe of Canada, you would see a great island broiling out of the Atlantic, its granite shores rollicking with fishing boats and flakes and fishermen. A sweep of colored houses faced the wind, smoke whirling from their chimneys, youngsters scrabbling after sheep and hens, and grandmothers scrabbling after the youngsters, hiding now within the swaths of sheets bellowing around them from the clotheslines. Not much came to us before the late 60s. Televisions, telephones, cars, roads, none of that. Most visitors were fog-bound fishers, the occasional aunt or uncle coming to visit, and the occasional young man or woman coming ashore to go courting. Yet, lots came to us in different ways, through songs, dance, Jannian, yarns spun on the spot and growing with each teller of the tale. No doubt, things have opened up since I was a girl. Still, there was a uniqueness of character, culture, and circumstance spawned in such an environment that resides in most of us who grew up there, and I never tire of talking about it or writing about it. It was during an adult education course after I graduated university during my 38th year that I started writing. I met an elderly woman named Ellie. She enraptured my mind with stories of skeleton women trapped in bad marriages and who ended up walking the floors of frozen oceans, trying to get out. Of how we see ourselves as ugly ducklings, not swans, and how we eat the poison apple of sleep as opposed to spiritual awakening. It was during one of those tales she turned to me and said, "You're dragging your own bag of bones, my dear." She said, "Go find your voice and write your myth." And I was 38. I hadn't written anything at that point. But it was a memory of joy that kept me going during my trials of physical and spiritual impoverishment. The memory of joy that sustained me through the dark hole I fell into during my 40s. Joy held me throughout the hellish battle of fighting for sanity in a world suddenly turned on its head. And yet, it is during those moments when joy is blanketed by fear, grief, contempt, guilt, shame, and so many other ills that I was kicked and bruised and hurting into consciousness, which is, I believe, where God lives. Somewhere in the bowels of this novel, I wrote, if consciousness were those perfect golden discs haloing the heads of divinity, it must be a battered, dented, and misshapen thing curling the heads of us mortals as we are dragged screaming and protesting into consciousness. I call them our conscious moments, when something, whether big or small, awakens us to a deeper way of seeing things, dredging us bit by bit from innocence into awareness. Looking back, I see these moments, some of them lasting for days, months, perhaps years, as lampposts, pinpointing my journey through the dark quarters of my past. This memoir follows a trajectory through some of the more momentous moments, leading up to the death of my mother and the publication of my first novel that her courage helped me create during her final days. For each moment recounted here, there are 50,000 more not written, thousands more. And during those moments when my personal story becomes lost in my mother's story during the writing of this memoir, it is because she carried me in hers. So aside from the page that went missing somewhere, and I hope you didn't notice when I when I missed a page, but it is, you know, is to show that it is me, it is a story of me, and also the story of my mom and our journey together, you know, and our writing toward how that first novel became wrote. So you'd like to think that everything that you have included in your memoir will be into that introduction. So when your reader is reading it, they get a feel for what's coming, you know.
I read an interview that you did where you remarked that you had quite a hard time initially because I think the phrase you used was that you felt too indulgent writing and that somehow you have to think, I think you said, think of yourself as a character and write as if you were a character, and that helped to distance you a little, because I can see from what you're describing in that beautiful opening is the power of that emotion that is generated in such a tiny place. I mean, you say 10 houses here and 10 houses there, and you could write about it for the rest of your life and probably will. I mean, that's extraordinary that so much could come out of such a tiny place. But with that depth of emotion, trying to distance yourself a little bit must be important.
It's hard to see yourself as a character. And when I started the memoir, of course, being a fiction writer, I wrote it from a distance. And so I wrote it as fiction, really. The entire thing, I wrote it as fiction. And I thought, oh, this is so cool, you know, it's memoir, but it reads like fiction. And so when I sent it off to Penguin, you know, they said, well, where the hell are you? Well, they didn't say hell. They're more polite. Say, Donna, where are you? Where did you go? You're not in the memoir. This is all sequencing of events that on the doll. So one of the things that you learn through writing memoir is that there are two voices of memoir. There is the reflective voice and there is the analytical voice. And so the reflective voice, of course, is when you're in the moment and the scenes are unfolding and you're writing like fiction. But the analytical voice is when you stand outside and you look back at what just happened back there and you put it in some kind of context. And that's where, you know, it's really indulgent on you. You're the narrator. So it just felt so indulgent, again, you know, so self-indulgent to just talk about self. I was really shy about it. And that was a huge thing to overcome, that this is me, I'm writing about me, get over it and enter yourself. And you are the character, you know, you're not fiction here. And so, yeah, third time around, it was okay.
Third time around.
Yeah. Yeah. Second one was a really rough draft. Third time I managed to get in there.
The idea of that when you rewrite your life, do you also relive it? And is that a difficult part of the process?
Yeah, I had a taste of that writing fiction because I was really mining my own life when I was doing fiction. If somebody was in grief, you know, I would mine my own grief for that, but still you were writing through a character. So in this one, this story is the loss of my brother, not my baby brother, but my 19-year-old brother. He he lost his life on my watch type thing. And so as a result of that, I went into a very dark place. Eventually, I suffered PTSD 8 years later. I had no idea what it was. And then, of course, my mother's cancer played into that, and then her dying. And the writing all started during that traumatic period with my mother. And so it was all interwoven. But going through some of those moments for memoir, because there's no filter now, there's no character carrying it, is me. And yeah, some of it was really, really tough. Jesus, it was really tough. And what happens too when you're writing a memoir is, so this is a lot of this was my family story as well, at least the parts to do with my mom, And so what you watch is the fact that when you're writing about a member of your family like that, you're kind of taking ownership of the story. And, it's like they were as much involved in my mom's part of the story as I was. And so, but I can only tell it from my perspective. So that's really, when they reading the memoir, they're like, this is all about Donna. It's all about Don. It's all about sis and mom. Where are we? So that's the thing that you have to do. So of course, I prepped my family for that, and they all read what I was writing. And I've got a wonderful family. So they were just saying, like, write the story. Never mind else. We'll get back at you at some other point. But for now, just write the goddamn story,
I hope you can see a whole raft of faces up on your screen.
Yeah, look at there's Caroline, and there's Jean. Oh, there's Jeannie, and there's Diane.
So I'm going to go through them as I see them.
There's my cousin Brian.
Or my
Jackson's arm. Oh, Jesus, I can't tell all my yarns now. Oh, there's Shelley, and there's Vern. Oh, guys, it's emotional. There's Paula.
So right. Just to reassure you that we weren't making them all up. They really are out there and listening to what you have to say. Let me ask, let's go in another direction.
Who is this up there, Michael? Michelle. It's not Doreen, is it? Doreen Reed?
I don't hear it. I don't hear it. I don't hear.
Okay, I'm getting totally distracted. I'm gonna shut up now. Okay, but hello, Brian Reed. I love you. I love you.
But they are listening, and they're nodding, and they're smiling and encouraging. I promise. Okay. People who I want to take a different direction for a minute. People who are among my friends that I consider to be avid readers have said that over the course of the pandemic, they have found reading to be harder to do than it ever was before. And as the pandemic goes on, they find it very difficult to concentrate, and especially if the book is a little more demanding than others may be. As a writer, is it too soon to process this? But as a writer, have you felt that your writing has been affected, or that it will be affected in any way, impacted by what's gone on in the last 12 months?
No, not at all. God, there's no difference in my life. I live in a room, I got my office. I'm in there 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in the backyard, I've got a lake and kayaks and paths through the woods, and I'm only 5 minutes from downtown. No, not at all. I mean, authors, we live alone. And so I didn't even notice there's something going on, except, no, not at all. And
I have to say that those of us who enjoy your writing are very relieved to hear this,
Actually, I can't say it was a blessing. There's been too much suffering for that. But they gave me the perfect excuse to not go out and visit or do all of these things that my husband is always wanting to do. So, no, not at all. It worked for me in that way. But praise God, it's over soon. because there's so much suffering going on. It just didn't happen to me in my life yet.
Let me talk a little about translation. How do you feel when someone comes to you and says, I'd love to translate this into Dutch, or I'd love to translate this into Japanese? I would think that you might be a little sort of baffled at the idea that this would translate into Japanese and be immensely popular in Japan, for example.
We had the German translator and I had this huge fight. He kept calling me like, where the hell are you getting these verbs, you know? What do you mean she sallied to? Where are you getting these verbs, you know? And I had the Newfoundland dictionary. He said, they're not in there, you know? And I said, look, we got our own in White Bay, and Brian Reed can testify to that, eh, Brian? The Japanese one, geez, I got the story. I got to tell it just because my cousin Brian is watching down there. But they, there was a page in my book, and Kit's Law, the first thing I ever wrote, and it said, one of the lines was, she said, you can't do nothing around here, she said, without the youngsters trying to crawl up your hole. And so I didn't think twice about that. So then all it's being translated in Japanese. And so I get these emails come saying, Ms. Morrissey, so sorry to bother. They were really polite. So sorry to bother you. So sorry to bother you. But what do you mean by youngsters trying to crawl up your hole? We would think that you would crawl down a hole. And they said that, because we would imagine a hole to be a dark place. But why would your children be wanting to crawl down into your dark hole anyway, you know? And I'm reading all of this and I'm going, oh, Jesus. I said, well, you know, it's like this back here in Newfoundland. We, those little buggers, you know, from the moment that they crawl out of their mother's orifice, you know what I mean? The little buggers are trying to crawl right back up there again. And she said, they came back and said, oh, is that why you Newfoundland and Canadian women always wear pants? And she said, just so you know, we're going to the beach right now, Ms. Morrissey, and we wish you were coming with us because we're going to get drunk. I was taken aback by that. It's like, okay, so they know I'm joking, right? And anyway, there were 1,000 moments like that. And I wish I could, that one always sticks out most in my mind, but there was 1,000 moments like that. Lost in translation, you might say.
Indeed. But it's clear that something about your experience in Newfoundland must have resonated.
Well, you know what they said? Because I asked them that. I said, why? Number one, how did you learn about, why would you choose my book about a girl from an isolated outport and Newfoundland, you know, at the darkest corner of Canada? And they said that your book is about the elderly and spirituality. She said, and that used to be the backbone of our culture, our elders, and our spirituality. She said, and we've lost it. We're losing it fast. We've probably lost it. She said, and that is what we connected with as publishers with your book. So there you go.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Newfoundland, for better or worse, is subject to caricature in Canada, probably as much or more than any other province in the country. You never slide into that caricature in your writing. Is that a conscious decision that you make? Does it come easily to you, or are you saying something about caricature?
Well,
and the character?
Yeah. Well, first, I got to break down that big word caricature to my cousin Brian Reed down there. I'm getting a dirty look. He's asking how come I don't make fun of Newfoundlanders in my books, Brian. Listen, the rest of Canada did that enough. We don't have to do it too. But it doesn't even occur to me. Life is very serious and very profound. And when I'm writing, I've never seen Newfoundlanders as caricatures. You know, it just never occurred to me. I wouldn't get away with it anyway. And I've had a lot of Newfoundlanders say that to me, actually. They say, thank God you didn't go into stereotyping us, or thank God you didn't try to get, you know, I discovered through the process of writing that accent and accent isn't about how you talk, you know, accent is about rhythm. It's about cadence, it's about rhythm. And in Newfoundland, we have this incredible, rich language, and we speak in metaphor. Newfoundlanders speak in metaphor. Sitting around a table, this is how we talk, you know? And so it's about taking that and putting it on the page without losing the richness of it, but without giving into that, you know, Lard, Thunder, and Jesus boy, which I never heard in my fucking life, okay? Till I went to the mainland, Lard, Thunder, and Jesus. I don't know where that come from. And guess what? I never ate a codfish till I went to Toronto either. So breaking down that stereotype is a tough one. And I think there's enough of us Newfoundlanders now out there on the main stage of Canada that we put a dent into that. Hope so.
I'm a little sensitive to it myself, of course, being Welsh. And again, like the Irish, you know, the being exposed to this over and over again can sometimes become so tiresome. And it's such a shame because, of course, as you say, that language is so rich, that character is so complex. I read the opening of The Fortunate Brother, and I was so struck by the brutality of it, and it stung me in a way, you know, which got me right past any kind of idea of stereotypical idea that I might have had in my mind when I first read about Newfoundland and thought about Newfoundland. But it is interesting that you clearly have nothing to do with it in a way, because it isn't at the heart of it. It isn't at the heart of you.
No, it's kind of surprising, actually. I remember once, I was in Ottawa somewhere, and it was a group of us, and it was an international, I think it was international, but anyway, I'm not even sure it was Ottawa, so I won't say Ottawa. It was somewhere in Canada. It was not in Newfoundland. And the hostess, it was a wonderful woman, absolutely wonderful. Everybody in the arts is wonderful, you know, with books, you know, she was organizing people basically, and it's okay, all you Ontarians over here and your Calgarians in the middle and the Newfies over here. And it was so stark, you know, the Calgarians, Ontarians, and Newfies. And I mean, she meant nothing by that. Her heart was pure, you know, but it was so out of place. It was like a sore thumb. And it was like, Jesus, you know, get it right.
Yeah. Donna, have we behaved ourselves well enough that you could be tempted to read us a little more from the memoir?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I've got a piece here, and I'm not in my own office, and I hope this is just water he's got here.
We can tell from the reading, I'm sure.
My cousin Brian Reed has toasted me with something. I can't believe it's water. What happened to you, buddy? You're toasting with water now. Talk about Newfoundland caricatures. Oh, Jesus. I wonder how long that was open on his desk. Okay, here we go. So this is chapter 1, actually. Fear is a huge theme going through this memoir. Fear is actually one of the guiding motivators, one of the motivators of my life. I've lived in fear for so long. This is one of my first memories, full out memories that I remember living through, me and my sister. And Brian Reed, you might remember some of this. So it came with a beckoning. It came within a flash, fear. It touched cold against my skin. And before I could grasp what it was, it seated itself inside the moist, dark marrow of my bones. I was 8. It was warm and sunny, the ocean lapping along the shore. I was heading for home. There was something wrong. There was something wrong. My ants were hovering on the road in front of my house. The ants never hovered in a huddle on the road. They were always inside doing things. They came out when a youngster cried too hard, or they needed a bit of kindling from the porch to flame a fire. They scooted to another's house for a cup of tea or to borrow a bit of pork fat or butter. They teamed up with buckets and rags and cleaned the school or Aunt Reen's or grandmother's house if those women were feeling too poorly to do it themselves. They never huddled. They never huddled. They never hovered in the middle of the road. My old Aunt Rose was leaning over her fence. She hasn't left her house in 40 years. Your little brother is dead, my love. Your little brother is dead, she said, her shriveled mouth trembling. Sin. He was just starting to walk, and now he's dead. I didn't know what dead was. I seen a chicken in grandmother's hen house once that was stiff and dirty and cold to the touch, and grandmother said it was dead. Baby Paul wasn't a chicken, and he was in a hospital because he had a cough. I didn't know what hospital was either. I was 8. I saw my father bound out of the house and jump into his truck. It fired up the engine. My mother behind him hauling on her sweater, and I started running. The truck jolted forward, and then Dad braked, seeing me. He rolled in his window. You go home now, he said. You go on home. His voice catching on a wet cough. And he roared off in a flurry of dust from that dry gravel road. My aunts stared after them, wringing their hands. And Aunt Marg whimpered, oh my, poor Claudine. She got to go through this again now. I looked to my Aunt Marg. I didn't know her words. I didn't know what she meant, but I felt something bad in them, just from the way she said it. My sister Wanda was beside me, and her hand found mine. She was a year younger than me. And our little brother Ford, he was struggling in my Aunt Beat's arms, and he was flailing his little fists after the truck, crying, baby ball, baby ball. It always made everybody laugh when he said baby ball for baby Paul. No one was laughing in that moment. My Aunt Beat, she ushered us inside our house and made us molasses bread and put us to bed when it got dark. We were asleep when Mom and Dad got home. Come morning, the ants were drifting and whispering through the house like a searching wind. Grandmother gave me and Wanda and Ford big warm hugs and helped us dress, and she fed us warm oatmeal sweetened with dates and bade us to be quiet. The ants had told us during the night that Paul was dead, but not what dead meant or what dead was. And when Wanda asked, what is dead? They said, the angels took him, my love. The angels took him away. He's an angel too now. Their voices were sad. It didn't fit with the sweet smiling pictures of angels in our mother's Bible. It was all wrong. Mother came downstairs. She was wearing a black dress. She sat quietly in her rocking chair. And this time she didn't mind that Wanda stood on one of the rockers and I stood on the other rocker on either side of her. Her sadness was deeper than the ants, and I knew not to ask her what did was. I only knew it was wrong. And there was a soft knock on the door after a while. And my mother took hold of our hands, mine and Wanda's. She held them tight as the door opened and one of my uncles entered. And he was carrying an oblong white box to his side. It had a thick white strap that was looped over his shoulder. And my mother, she dropped mine and Wanda's hands and she raised hers to her face when she started crying. My uncle, he walked past us with his head down, and my aunts, they all stood back with bowed heads. The only sounds were their sniffles and my mom's weeping. And my mother rose, and Wanda and I stepped off the rockers, and we held hands again, me and Wanda. And Mom followed the uncle into the living room that was never used and whose door was always closed. It was always cool in there, even in the summertime. It was much cooler this morning with the curtains drawn. I was surprised to see Dad in there, lying on the sofa that was never used. His face was burrowed into the cushions, and I thought he was sleeping. It felt wrong. He never slept in there. Nobody slept in that room. And his shoulders were heaving, and he was making little whimpers as though he was fretting inside of his dreams. Now our uncle, he laid that white box atop of the little table that was set there. And he slowly took off his cover. And there was a smell that I didn't know, but I thought of soap. I stretched up on my toes to see inside the box. And baby Paul was there. His face was so still. It was so very, very still. So still that it just struck away all memory of him ever having puckered and laughed. And his little lips looked blue and frozen. And my mother cried and cried. And she touched her hand to his forehead and held it there. And my Aunt Claire's face broke into crinkles and she started sobbing like Mom was. And I thought she was mocking my mother, and I kicked her. She bent down and smothered her face against my shoulder. Then she led me and Wanda to the door, but I didn't want to go. I kept looking back. I kept seeing my father lying there on the sofa with his back to everyone and his face deeply buried into the cushions. But my Aunt Claire made us go with her. She took us to her house and she fed us canned peaches in little orange glass bowls. Bedtime, she took us back to our home. And the other aunts, they were all still there. And Mom was still sitting in her rocker, her face in her hands. But Dad was gone. The aunts washed us. They dressed me and Wanda in our pajamas and little 40. They walked us quickly through the living room where baby Paul lay still in that white box. And the smell of soap was so strong now. They hurried us upstairs out of that room and they put us to bed. And Mom came and she kissed us and tucked us in. And I was afraid to put my arms around her neck like I always did and squeeze her like I always did. Everything was wrong. I woke up the next morning before Wanda. I listened for the kitchen sounds that greeted me every morning like bird song. But there was none this morning. It heard silence. I heard a silence. It spoke a language that I didn't know. I got out of bed and I peeked into Mom's room, but neither she nor Father were there. I crept down the stairs and into the living room. That white box, it was on the table. The cover was off. Baby Paul was there, and he was still and silent as stone. And that little bump of his nose was the only curve on his little white face. I crept closer, and that smell of soap, it just became stronger. And I lifted my hand up as my mother had done, and I touched it to his forehead like she had done. And I leapt back with a cry of fright because his skin was so cold. It was as cold as sea ice. And I knew then what death was. I knew then that death was that stillness inside baby Paul, and it was cold. Death killed baby Paul, just like it done grandmother's chicken. And perhaps, if not for that sudden realization of knowing that baby Paul would never leave this box and crawl through the floor again, or about the floor again, and perhaps or that gurgle spit in his chin, or flail his arms and wet his diaper. If I had not realized all of that in that moment, and perhaps if the door hadn't opened at that moment, and my grandmother hadn't come swooping in, taking my hand and leading me quickly from that room into the kitchen for a little rock and some bread and tea, perhaps I might have felt it when that sliver of fear entered me when I touched his little head. Perhaps I would have felt it more. Perhaps I would have spoken of it to my mother later. As it was, I quickly lost myself inside my grandmother's chatter and that of my aunts milling about, making hot oatmeal for everybody and frying baking. And then those times throughout the day when I was alone and thought back to that flash of knowing with baby Paul and that touch of fright that had accompanied it, I stole away from it. I wouldn't think about it. I tucked it away like a horrid secret, as though I were the only one who knew that death killed baby Paul. Okay, that's that. That's chapter 1. That was a nice chapter. I'm joking. I'm joking. There's a lot of joy that comes from sorrow. And in my family, we mine the sorrow for the joy. I think someone said once that you don't know nobody unless you know that their roots are rooted in hell, and that the glory of what's up here and even what's down there, there's glory down there too. And that, there's joy in life. And okay, ask me a question. Let's get past this one.
It's such a privilege to hear you read it, Donna. Thank you so much. I think now we do have a couple of questions from the good people whose faces you see around you. So I'll hand it over to Lucy to see if she can introduce the.
Quickly, can I just say hello to Bernie that I see there, and hello to Kimberly Matheson, and hello Rosalind, and Shelley's still there, and Paula, and of course my cousin Brian, he better not leave till this is over, and Diane Cavanaugh, and it's just really beautiful seeing you guys. I haven't seen, thank you so much.
We've got Brian tied to the sofa, it's okay.
Brian Reed, you're tied to the sofa, okay.
My name is Danuta. Michael is my husband.
Okay, and your name is?
Danuta.
Danuta. Jesus. Hi.
Hi.
It's a long time.
Here's
All this-
Michael. Here he is.
Wow. Okay, this is just really overwhelming here. It is so beautiful to see you.
That was an incredible reading, Donna.
Thank you.
It was very powerful.
Thank you.
And I asked sounds quite pedantic as a result of after listening to that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I was just interested in how you dealt with naming your characters and whether or not you used their real names. People's real names changed them.
I used all their real names, and I got permission first. And yeah, but there's one or two names in the memoir that are to disguise people, but for the most part, you're all named. Sue me if you want. I got the truth on my side.
It's great. Wonderful.
So wonderful to see you.
Thank you. We love your books.
Thank you. Thank you.
You had a question for her. Did you change names for your? Oh no, sorry. I'll be quiet. So we now have Jean Rosie on the screen. So you can.
Hello, Jeannie. Hello,
Hi,
Jeannie.
Donna. Hi, Donna. Nice to see you. Miss
Nice
you.
to
I'm having a drink in your honor tonight, so I'll look forward to seeing you sometime. We'll have a drink together. But my question was, what happened to baby Paul? How did he die? And maybe you don't want to share that, but I just didn't know if that was okay to ask that question, but just wondered how he died and if you know the cause of death.
Yeah, it was one of these unfortunate stories that when my mom had two babies that had died, and she didn't want to risk, because she gave birth at home, and when little Paul got sick, she was afraid because she had all this guilt about him, her 2 babies that had died with the midwife. And so when he got sick, she took him to the hospital, and really he just had a little flu. But while he was in the hospital, he caught diphtheria. It was raging through the hospital, and he caught it and died because of that, not because of why he got sick, which really played a number on my mom. And so there was a lot of grief and a lot of guilt, and this plays its way throughout the entire memoir and comes to surface when she's, you know, it's yeah, it was a big, deep story.
Okay, so I just wanted to say one more thing, and I'll hang up then, but it just, your memoir is just making me crave for more of your book. So I think that's a good sign. I can't wait to read the whole thing and to get, you know, even if you're going to do more readings tonight, I'm just hanging on your every word. It's beautiful and you're magnificent once again, as always. But I just want to say, wonderful hearing you speak, and miss you like crazy, and see you soon. Love you.
Next
God bless you.
question comes from Vern.
Vern. Hey, Vern.
Oh, Donna, nice to meet you in the flesh, as it were.
Yeah. Are you the guy, you're the person I've been messaging with.
That be me. I've read everything, including Katie Cross.
Oh,
I
wow.
read that yesterday. In fact, I got it from the library and loved it too. So, but my question, if it's a fair question, is why did you leave the beaches at age 16?
That's covered in the memoir, so you're gonna have to keep reading, Vern, but basically.
I will buy the book, and I'm happy if you want to, and I can find out by reading the book.
I left the beaches because it was time that we all started moving out. I guess I was the first generation. Our generation was the first to really move out. And yeah, and we had television at this point, and man, things were looking really exciting out there. They had these things called hippies and people dancing in the street and wearing headbands and smoking pot, and I was like, fuck, I wanted some of that. I wanted all of it. I was excited. And so yeah, I went out looking for this world and I found it. Yeah, and that's chapter 5.
Well, thank you. I'll look forward to the book.
Thank you, Vern. It was lovely meeting you.
And you, thank you.
Our next question comes from Carol Ann.
Hi, Carol Ann.
We have to ask you to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Sorry about that. I just wanted to say thank you for having this webinar tonight. I've been a huge fan of yours for a very long time. I've read all your books.
Thank you.
Love
you.
them. I grew up in Newfoundland as well. I'm from Cupid's.
Okay.
And I totally get the language. I totally get the culture. And every book I read of yours makes me homesick. And I just wanted to say
So you're not living at home in Cubans?
No, I'm living in Nova Scotia now.
Very good. Good place. Next best place. Next best thing.
That's right. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol Ann.
Okay. Next person hasn't
There's a
appeared
Mary
yet.
Jo Anderson down there. Hello, Mary Jo.
Oh, yeah, Mary Jo had a question, yeah. I have to ask you to unmute yourself. There she is. We need you to unmute
There
yourself.
she is. Mojo.
I didn't really have a question other than to say you're just feckin' brilliant, Donna. And that passage you read just blew me away.
I'm waiting for my review.
Okay. you
Only you
bet.
can write them.
Okay.
It was great to see you again. God bless you.
God, you look younger than when I saw you last. How do you do that?
Filters. There's filters on here. Filters. And I've got my laptop on books, so my chin is up.
Yeah, that's my thing. God, it's great to hear that passage.
So you can't see all this hanging. Yeah. Yeah. God bless you.
Okay.
Oh,
Our
I
next
can't wait to
question
see
comes
you.
from Lynette.
Hi, Lynette. Where are you?
Did I? Where are you? She's there.
I see her name, but not her face.
Here we are. Start video. Is
There
that-
she is.
Oh, yeah. It's been
There
so
she is.
enjoyable. Thank you. That was wonderful about the little girl part. You finding out about what death was. I think that was a wonderful lead into discovering what death means. And my question for you is the first chapter the actual beginning of your memoir, or
Yes.
does it occur somewhere in the middle and you're going to go back and start somewhere before?
No, no,
the
that
beginning.
was
Mhm.
chapter 1, and chapter 1 was fear. And
That's the beginning.
so, and from there it grows into the fallout, mother, father, and some passages go quickly, some you slow down and indulge in. Those that really kick you, you slow down, and then you gallop
Well, that
along.
was wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynette.
We have a question from Shelley.
Hello, Shelley.
Hello, Donna. Do you see me?
You can speak now, Shell. I can see you, darling. How's Toronto?
I'm assuming or presuming, I suppose, that the writing of the memoir affected you as a writer, but maybe as a human being as well. So I just wondered if you had a comment about that.
Well, again, it's story is so powerful. Writing story is so powerful. It really does give you a way of going back and examining your past and taking apart and understanding how some things were. And it's sacred. The ground that we've traveled thus far, all of us, is sacred, and transversing it is sacred. It's all a holy experience. And when you sit down and you take it and you convert it into story, it really allows you to see it for what it is and to get that strength and courage from it. I think everybody out there should be writing your memoir. Don't think about publication. Don't think about things like that. Just sit down and write your story. Write a story, any story. And because, is when you write your story, you take us into your world. And when I read to you, I took you into mine. When you write, you take us into your world. And it is only when I hear your words can I understand who you are. Your words, your voice, your story, it is truly our fingerprint, because they're a thumbprint, because there's no other voice like yours, like mine. And everybody has their story. And there's something really, really powerful with story. When you tell me your story, when I hear your voice, you are reaching me, you evoke emotion in me. Because I am listening to you, I am feeling your pain. I am feeling your joy. I am in sync with you. It's an amazing thing that happens, and I had this explained to me, that when I'm listening to you and you are evoking these emotions in me, just like I just invoked in you, our brains synchronize. Like our brains actually emit, what is that word, that oxytocin? Oxytocin is released in our brains when we are evoked, when emotions are evoked. It is that love feeling, and other neurons are also released, and we synchronize. And that is why I can cry listening to you, because I am feeling what you're feeling. And why we go to movies and we cry, we're in sync with that person up there. And that is the power of story. And it is when you tell your story that people get to hear you and understand you. They say that deceit is probably the worst thing that can happen to a person. More than any other injustice, deceit is the one that can destroy. And so many of us have been deceived in our lives, you know. So many of us have met up with deceit. And it turns us into angry people and cynical people. And we act that out into the world, you know. So when we listen to our stories and we understand each other, and as writers, we get to have the last word. And you get to understand who I am and what I'm all about. You get to understand it yourself first and foremost. So again, it doesn't matter about publishers. You understand it, and you get to transcend that wound through healing. You know, and yeah, we just need to listen to each other more. Write your stories, everybody.
Donna, what can I say? Well, you know, I love being right. And at the beginning of this evening, I promised all of our audience that they were in for a rare treat. And thanks to you, I've been proven right. And it makes me very happy, just as it made me very happy to meet you and very happy to listen to you. Thank you so much. Please take care of yourself. Please get that book published just as soon as you can. And
September the 15th.
all right.
And you can pre-order now.
Wonderful, wonderful. And we wish you every success with your next project and many projects, and take care of each other. Thank you.
God bless. God bless.